Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. In this week's episode, we are picking up where we left off in last week's episode. Now, if you didn't catch that, the short story is this. Nate gave us a massive download from his brain on how to do event-based marketing in your school, specifically an open house model where you invite people in the community to come in. And Nate really detailed all the benefits that are conferred upon a school that does this kind of model. He really went into detail even on how to run an event like that. But as we got towards the end, I realized there were some big questions that I still had for Nate. And as opposed to recording a different episode next, I just wanted to ask Nate the rest of the questions I had. And I think those questions are going to be really helpful to you, because really what we want to look at today is, how do you get people to show up to that open house? How do you promote the open house so people can actually come in and taste and experience all that your school has to offer? And then what are some logistical things that people should do to make a day like that run really, really well? Now, Nate did give us kind of his timetable for how the open house runs, but we didn't really talk about how to make sure that it goes off. So we're going to talk about staffing. We're going to talk about roles. We're going to talk about other things that Nate finds important, because once again, I'm just asking Nate cool questions, and he's giving us a masterclass on how to do that. So, Nate, let's jump right into it.
Do it.
What does BMF do to make people aware of this open house opportunity? I know last episode you said that you've been doing open houses seriously for about 5 years. So I'm sure that you've tried a lot of things. You've seen things that work. You've seen things that don't work. I'd love to know what those main things are that do work. And then we might even get into, hey, avoid doing this. We tried it. Never really worked for us. So let's start with the positive. What's worked for you all to get people to show up?
Yeah. So it's actually not that different than the normal type of all-inclusive marketing effort you would do for anything that's really, seasonally, let's say around fall enrollment, et cetera. But I'm going to go through our checklist here. The first and most powerful marketing we have is our email list. No question.
Love it.
And so we're refining the list. We might have 13,000 names on it right now, but we're actually only looking for people that have been engaged with us, say, in the last 120 days. Plus, our camp list is really important, because the open house is really effective for enrolling in day camps and summer camps. So we'll go back and we'll look at everybody who's purchased from us or inquired about camp, say, for the last 3 years. So the list will end up being about 4,200 emails, right? So we start there. And of course, you're setting up this is obvious, but you're setting up a simple RSVP. You're setting up a simple landing page that has a simple RSV opt-in. And you're not asking for too much information, because you just really want them to show up. You just want an RSVP list that you can then try to get to actually show up to your event. What we also do is we hit the family-focused listservs. That's really important. We're posting links there in the different Facebook groups that are, and in a place like Brooklyn, it's very community-focused. So you'll have like the Bay Ridge group, the Borum Hill group, we also do printed flyers, and we put those printed flyers up both within our school and then also where it's appropriate next to schools within our community, right? Finally, we do this sort of obvious social posting that's leading up to the event, talking about what we're going to be doing, why we do it. We have we go into Canva and make our fancy flyers, etc., and posts, and we put them up on Facebook and Instagram. So the final piece is just word of mouth. So within our community, that's the most powerful marketing you have, is just reminding families. So Will, our community manager, will always be reminding families 2 weeks leading up to the event, hey, we've got this open house. We'd love for you to come celebrate with us. Just letting them know in the community room. And pointing to the poster that's there, saying, hey, check it out. And there's always, of course, a QR code on the poster, and they can just scan that and RSVP themselves if they want. But just go straight to the landing page. So, that's basically what we're doing. It's not complicated, but you need to make sure you're checking all the boxes, and you need to start with the obvious, which is creating a landing page that states precisely the date, time, who's invited, what you're going to do, and then you move on from there.
Okay. I've got a few follow-up questions for you, but before I do that, let me even just say that it is not our intention in this episode to reinvent the wheel.
No.
Over the past almost 70 episodes now, we have had a few episodes where I've gone on a little bit of a rant about marketing that's working right now. Let me actually even reference a few of those episode numbers for everyone listening, because right there, Nate said that it isn't all that different from how they do fall enrollment, or in a way, he's saying just how we do marketing in general. So if you wanted some episodes where we talk a little bit more in depth about marketing, you go to episode 57, how to sell out your summer camps. That's one.
Love it.
You could actually go to episode 58, where we talked about competition. Do other music schools threaten your business? And I talked in there 7 really great ideas for marketing that will kind of protect you and things that every school should be doing. You could go all the way back to episode 18, stress test your school's marketing, and episode 19, where we had an interview with a music school owner who used to be in corporate marketing, quit his job, went and started his own school. And actually, in a couple of weeks, we're having him back in the podcast to talk, kind of give us a little bit of an update on his school. Those are 2 really great episodes on marketing as well. So 18, 19, 57, 58. And I know that there's other episodes, that where we do talk about that marketing piece, but those really stand out to me. Another resource that you could take advantage of is go to growyourmusicstudio.com/free. We literally have free marketing trainings that you can take. And all you got to do is click in any of the links on that page that'll take you to one of our free marketing trainings. That's a way you can kind of get the wheels turning when it comes to marketing. Now, having said all that, Nate, I had a few follow-up questions about what you said there. It would seem to me that depending on what you're marketing in a school, there might be things that you would emphasize more. And you mentioned something in that list of techniques that Brooklyn Music Factory has used in the past. It seems to me that for this particular type of event, it feels like it would be a massive mistake to not rely upon referral or word of mouth marketing.
Right. No. Yes, you need your own families to be talking about it.
Absolutely. And so, in some of these episodes I just referenced, we really do talk more about like general cold marketing, ads, social strategy, like all that sort of thing. And I think those are good. And I do think you can do that. But Nate, are there any specific things you do to stimulate families sharing this open house opportunity to other people? You're only running 1 or 2 of these a year, so you really do want good attendance. How do you stimulate your families? I have some ideas, but I'd love to hear what you all have done.
Yeah, one thing we do that's key is we include our students and our families in the actual event. So I talked about this in the previous episode. Our advanced bands come play 15-minute sets on the main stage every hour. And so let's say we had 3 bands or 3 bands this last open house. Right away, you're already including like 15 families there.
Yeah.
And so those families are going to spread the word about the fact that their child's playing at this open house. You should all come, and they're gonna invite their friends.
But is there anything you do to actually do you specifically ask them? Do you incentivize them? Do you remind them several times to or is it just like, oh, they're coming, we know they'll invite people? I'm curious.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I've always had resistance to the idea of incentivizing referrals.
Okay.
And I don't quite, that might be a deeper dive into my own psyche to understand that. But what I do believe is that, number one, if you're having an event that you want people to attend, you need to ask them to attend it. So in other words, if you're, in this case, with these parents, you're saying, hey, your child's playing, will you please bring 2 or 3 friends? We really want to celebrate our space and what we do, and we would love it if people that believe in our program as much as you do bring along some friends to show them what we do. So you have to ask. It's one of the most basic principles that gets forgotten often, right? Especially if you're averse to sales.
Yeah.
Right? And that you do. I mean, you talk about this all the time, Daniel, and you're great at it, where you're like, look, If you want something, ask for it. Declare what you have and state it. Yeah. And so this is what we mean. Like lately, we've been on a Google review. Oh, wait, can I pitch another episode on marketing that I strongly encourage our listeners to go back and listen to again?
Oh, please.
Because it was really episode 47 with Sarah Campbell. I think was a great one that we did. That was on, and she's just an awesome social media mind, and has really wonderful advice. And coming out of that, as well as some other apps we did, stress testing. That episode was great. One of the things that I came out of from those as an owner was, oh yeah, Google reviews are really, really foundational. And you know what? We need to ask our families, especially as we're opening this brand new location that's amazing and people are all excited about, we need to ask them to help us spread the word. And so for the last month, we've had a Google review priority. Right? And it's just another example. We literally every single week we're measuring how many more reviews we have from the week prior.
Absolutely.
We've set a goal. We want to reach the same number or more reviews than the music school in our community that has the most.
I have to jump in here and say this.
Yo, what do you got?
You referenced this in the competition episode, and I said that a lot of times the biggest threat to a school owner is not some outside threat. It's usually because they're not – usually the owner's biggest threat is themselves.
Yes.
And when I go back and evaluate folks, like I literally was in a coaching call recently where someone said that such and such a thing wasn't happening and they didn't understand why.
Mm-hmm.
And my first thought is like, okay, we got to start talking about like advanced, like how do we get more students into the school, like whatever. And I was like, wait, calm down, Daniel. Ask them a few questions. And I asked them some questions that I thought, oh, these are silly to ask because I know they're going to say yes. And basically the questions were, are you doing this obvious thing number 1? Are you doing this obvious thing number 2? Are you doing this obvious thing number 3, 4, and 5? And they were not doing any of them. Oh, well, now I understand why you're getting the result you're getting. And to me, it was like, well, of course, they've got to be doing at least that. Surely they are. But no, they weren't. So it's one of those things where sometimes the most obvious stuff isn't done. And, it's been a couple episodes since I referenced the Michael Jordan documentary, The Last Dance. So here we go.
Go.
I love that documentary.
As do I.
And one of the things that's really interesting was that one of the coaches in the early years of Michael Jordan's career, the general manager was saying, hey, I think you should run this type of offense. And the coach at the time was like, no, I don't want to run that offense. That's like an old-fashioned offense. That's like that's not really accepted anymore. And so they ended up firing that coach, and then they brought in Phil Jackson, who ran this type of offense. It was called the triangle, and it was considered like an outdated way of doing it. And they won 6 championships on top of running the triangle offense. It was such a basic way of doing things that people just didn't even take it seriously or respect it anymore. And I hear things like so let's bring this back to music studio land. Go and make a post for your open house. Nice Canva graphic. It does not you do not need to hire a graphic designer. Just go use one of their pre-made templates. Post it on your timeline. And then Canva has an option where you can export it as a reel. A real video where it's just an image, but it's like a 5-second video. Facebook is boosting Reels. The kind of engagement I'm getting on Reels right now is like 10x over Facebook stories, okay? Little hack there for you. Now, here's the deal. Go to your timeline post of that reel or just an image. Grab the link for that post. Write a mass email to your studio and say, hey, we are running an open house and we want to invite you. Would you please just click this and share to your timeline?
Nice.
You will see that go from views in the hundreds to the thousands, possibly tens of thousands. And then now because of that, and because of the engagements on it, bonus points if you put something on there that makes people click the image, or if you make it a carousel so they have to click to see 3 images. That Facebook shows that as engagement. Okay, now what happens then? Well, now you've got all these views. Facebook's like, whoa, this is performing better than 99% of the posts on your page. They'll start boosting it in the timeline now. for everybody who likes your page. And if you've done the work of over the years, making sure that everybody joins your studio or anybody in your community knows about your business and has liked your business page, all of a sudden they're seeing it now. And now, yeah, sure, there's a lot of people, when mom and dad share it to their timeline, sure, their friends in your local community are going to see it. But yeah, also Uncle Frank and halfway across the country is going to see it as well. It doesn't matter. There might be people who don't need to see it that are seeing it, but the right people that need to see it will see it. This is just one of those little things. This takes like 5 minutes to execute. And it can mean the difference between 20 people showing up and 60 people showing up. And then bonus points, again, this is one of those obvious things that sometimes I just forget to say. Bonus points, if you do this 3 or 4 times in the weeks leading up to it. Not everyone's going to share it the first time. Remind people, if they didn't, you as the owner can go there and see the people that share. Go and look, 18 people shared this. There's 180 families in the studio. That's only 10%. Go back and write the other, 162 that didn't. Take out the people who did share it already and then send it again. And then send it again and then every week until you get like 50% participation. It's these little things. They add up. They matter. And the kind of exposure you could get on just a stupid little hack like that. Like in my own mind, I picked like the dumbest thing you could possibly do. But look how much value you could get out of it if you're just consistent and you do the obvious stuff.
Can I make a follow-up on that, Daniel?
Sure.
So you bring up you say do it again and again until you get engagement. This requires something from us, listeners, that want to do this open house. It requires that you begin to anticipate better, i.e., you're mapping out an annual calendar and saying,
yes,
man, Nate and Daniel were talking about doing an open house. And Nate, it turns out that at Brooklyn Music Factory, they do a spring open house and they do a fall open house. Well, I can open up my Google Cal and just put it in the books now. We're going to do an open house in, May, and we're going to do an open house again in September. And then one more in October to catch all those people that didn't, all those families that didn't get enrolled in time. But put it in the books because your open house run of show is not really going to change. So once you start putting the team together and designing what's going to work for your school, then now you have the opportunity to follow through on what Daniel's talking about. Right? Because if we're doing it with 1 week or 2 week, hey, wait, I should do this right now, then you don't have the opportunity to put in 1 or 2 of these hacks. And I'll say that, Daniel, what you talk about there may seem obvious to you, but guess who it's not obvious to? Nate. You know what's obvious to me is declaring in person to every parent I see that we have this event and you should come to it. So I want to highlight something around the obvious point because this is where we have to, as owners, have not only have empathy for ourselves, but also for our team. What's obvious to me, Nate, as someone who promotes an event that I think is really important and how I do it, may not be obvious to Jessica or Will or anybody else on my team. So first of all, you have to state what the intent is. We're having an open house. It's in 6 weeks. I intend for us to have 100 families to show up. Okay, you're stating the thing to your team. Secondly, you say, here's my ideas of how I think we can get the word out. Here's what I'd like us to do. Then you have to turn to your team and you say, what's obvious to you for how we would get the word out? Even if you only have 1 or 2 other people, even if it's just your desk person, you're just like, but you have to have that open conversation to figure out what you haven't considered yourself, number 1, and number 2, what they hadn't even considered because you shared your ideas.
Yes.
And then finally, and then I want to keep moving here on this sucker, but finally, if you want your team to ask families to come to the event, then you have to model it yourself when you're on site at the music school asking families to come to the event, right? You have to be the model for what you want your team to do. And then if you witness something on your team doing that you're not doing, i.e. maybe your team is like, hey, Nate, I posted 1 social piece on this and I want to do 2 or 3 more, and your head is not in that space. You're like me, you're always in the present, in the space itself. but you're not thinking about consistent social media posting, etc., then you have to go to them and you have to say, great idea. How can I help? I want to help you on this.
Yeah.
Right? You got to be in the game.
So I even want to follow up on that, because if we're talking about filling this up, then I want to make just two small thoughts there, because I love that you said that wasn't so obvious to me. And this is why I think doing this in a team-based way can be helpful. And there's two ways to do that. That's either internal team. I'm going to talk about that for a second. One of the reasons I love having a Gen Z marketing team member is she sees things differently than me. And she and I meet on a fairly regular basis. She's local to me. Most of my team is virtual, but she's local to me. And we'll just hit a coffee shop here in town, and we'll spend hours talking about social strategy, our plan. And she does see things in a different way. We bounce ideas off each other, and we help each other in that way. So there's different perspective, but there's all kinds of ways that we're different from each other as humans. And the more diversity that you can get in your think tank, the more you're going to have that. There's a second way. There's an external way. And this is where I think our mastermind has been helpful to the studios and schools that are involved in that. Because one person will say, hey, I want to do this particular thing. And Nate and Daniel have an opinion. But then we have other really successful school owners in there who all say, oh, we did it this way. We did it this way. And there's stuff that I've heard that Mr. Marketing, Daniel, like I hadn't even thought of doing something that way. Or they had a subtle way of there was a subtle shade to it. Oh, that's interesting. I never thought of it that way. Just in the same way that we're both talking about communicating to parents, but you said, yeah, I'll reach out to them in person. And Daniel, who's, so that's Gen X. Yeah. And Daniel, millennial, is like, oh, social post, share it. I wonder what Bethany would say. I wonder, she's like, oh, no, totally. If I was going to reach out to someone in person, this is the way that I would do it. It's just fascinating how we can get that diversity of thought and creativity the more people that we bring into our sphere. So, Nate, I know you had some other things you wanted to say, but I just wanted to add that last little bit in there. Where do you want to go next?
I think it's important. Hold on. I made some notes on this. I think it's interesting to think about like essential pieces in strategizing a successful open house, and then maybe sharing a few mistakes that we've made at Brooklyn Music Factory that over the past. We've actually now, it's been more than 5 years. It's been more like 8 years we've been doing it. And I shared the first best practice in my mind, which is it requires an intentionality around planning. So I'm looking literally right now on my computer at our March 4th, 2023 open house run of show, which is like a 5-page GDoc, right? And it was copied from our last GDoc run of show and then updated. But it requires that you actually have an outline of the event that you intend. And on this planning sheet, we have the link to the landing page. We have the link to the opt-in form. We have the obvious specifics. When exactly is the thing? What time is the thing? This is all basic information that everybody on the team needs to be able to quickly and easily find. Because believe me, the teacher that you're hiring to come, in our case, run Jam Band 101 games in a classroom, she doesn't know the time. She just needs right? She's not thinking that way. She's not thinking the same way as Jessica, who is the organizer. But on the page, you have the schedule, the actual run of show. It's in 15-minute increments, starting at 1 and ending at 5. You have the different roles. For example, who's working the stage? Who's working, in our case, the drum circle? And it has a name attached to everyone. Who's working the reception desk, which is the table with all our one sheets? Jessica and Will's name is on there. Who's running the raffle? Who's running front of house sound? Who are our tour guides? These are all essential roles. Who are in each studio? Who's running a mini keys game? Who's running a club keyboard game? Who's running the private lesson sample games and songwriting studio? Those are all roles that we need, and they need to have a name attached to them. Then as you get down here, there's sort of the next piece on our one sheet is just like, oh, okay, what's the general overview? What's the intent of this whole thing? So that when someone asks, Will in our community room, well, wait, what's going on at an open house? He can just be like, in general, this is what you can expect. This is what the event's going to look and feel like. So he's got some talk points. And then finally, on this same one sheet, we have our basic, how are we going to get the word out? We literally have a section just on marketing. How are we getting the word out? Okay, we're going to do these 5 things. And that way we have a checklist. And then finally underneath it, there's just notes from each meeting agenda. And we probably had 4 meetings leading up to the open house. Each one was run by Jessica, who was the one who was owning this event. Jessica and Will were owning it. And that was it. Every time she had a meeting, she was opening up the one sheet and being like, okay, let's go over this one more time. And then she would put notes in there and she would update it. And then we would have tasks. And that was the deal. And so I'd say best practice number 1 is making sure you're anticipating, like we talked about, making sure that you have a simple, one sheet that you can just start filling in the blanks on, and making sure that you're beginning to think about the team you want to build. It doesn't have to be 5 people like at BMF or 7 people. It can be 2 people at your open house, depending on the size and scale of what you want to do, right? Next best practice I already touched on within the one sheet, Daniel, is you have to have roles and responsibilities. It's like a mini org chart, but for your event, right? You don't want to get on site for the event and have 5 cooks in the kitchen that are all trying to make the salad. Can't have that. You got to have one sous chef who's working there. You got to have your dessert and salad plater, and you got, it's just the same. Just imagine the kitchen and then divvy up the roles and then stay out of each other's way. I never went over to the desk where Jessica and Will were working and started answering questions for parents. Not once in 4 hours. Even though I wanted to. I stayed out of the way because that was their role and responsibility. Parents would come find me and say, hey, I recognize you from videos. Do you think I could ask you a specific question? And I'd be like, of course. But I never went over there and usurped the role of Jessica as the person who answers all the questions around scheduling, etc. Okay, last thing, mistakes. And then that's all I wanted to share on this app so far. So mistakes we made was we over-planned. We had there was a time when we had parents all RSVP and then have to select an exact hour that they were going to show up. Or we had all of these sample private lesson trials, and we're like, okay, we're going to use our automation and we're going to make them check boxes, and then we're going to have spreadsheets for every hour of every parent that enrolled in the 1 p.m. slot versus the 2 p.m. slot. And it was just way more work than it needed to be, right? Number 2, we made the mistake of not including students at first. It was all teachers and staff. Yeah, for a while it was like we didn't have students there that were actually Brooklyn Music Factory students that were leading tours and being the spokespeople, right?
Wow.
That was a mistake we made. We learned our lesson. We're like, wait, why don't we just have them actually advocate for what we do?
Sure.
And then a final mistake we made is we sort of I think we overstaffed it, right? We were like, let's get all the teachers to be here. We would have meet your teacher event, and it's so logistically hard, as anyone listening knows, to get 15 teachers to all show up on a Saturday afternoon. That's just a total pain in the ass. And then it makes the event, it saps the energy out of the event, right? And that's not at all what we want. We want it to be a celebration. I think the last mistake we made was we didn't realize how valuable our actual customers and community that were already enrolled would be to the event. So we thought it was always about getting new families in the door, new families. And instead, now we realize, wait, we want to have, if we have 25 new families come in the door, we'd love it if we also had another 25 existing families in there with them.
Yeah.
And that makes it much more authentic, honestly, and it feels less salesy.